Hey guys, Ariel over here at Nyth. I'm just putting my muck boots on because we are going to do a little bit of fencing today. People ask me all the time about how I keep critters out of my garden. If you look at my wildlife photos, you'll notice obviously there are a lot of big wildlife around here that would eat my garden. And I do have a fence. It's just not visible most of the time. But it seems to have developed a hole because I see something suspiciously munched on top. So we're going to go investigate. Come on along. Now in my garden I have had a problem with some little underground thing munching. I can show you some of its holes. But something taller came along and munched off a whole bunch of the tops of my Brussels sprouts, which makes me very sad because they're slow growing. You can see the little baby Brussels just barely growing under there. And I like Brussels sprouts, so hopefully they recover. But something taller munched that off, so I'm going to figure out where they got in if I can. Okay, so I'm over here at the back edge of the clearing. This fence is pretty temporary. My tiny house is parked in a non-permanent location. If you haven't followed my other videos, I trade work to the property owners for in exchange for being able to park here. So I don't have any big permanent setups, but I do have to have a fence or I wouldn't be able to grow anything. Now even in this video, this is probably fairly invisible. This is my fencing. Got a little bit of spare pieces right down here. See if I can show you. This, I think, is usually sold as deer fencing, deer netting, something like that. Comes in a few sizes. This is a pretty fine mesh one. And it's, as you can see, it's a flexible fence. This is not wire, some kind of plastic. But, you know, it's flexible, but kind of stiff. Now to hang this, what I've been told is that you don't want it stretched nice and tight. If you've ever done most every kind of fencing, you know, you want it tight and snug and all that. Part of the deterrent to critters with this is that it's floppy. And I've observed that this does indeed seem to work. Things like deer and elk and moose and whatever come up to it and they see that it's floppy and they're very hesitant to jump it because they're worried about getting tangled in it. This fence is only, here it's sagging, this is the part we're about to fix. You know, this fence is only like 6 feet high and deer and such could definitely jump that if they wanted to. They just don't seem to prefer to. So, it's been working well. I've had it up for a few years. Every winter it tends to come down a little bit over the winter. Gotta rehang it because all this fence is made out of is a whole bunch of this, which I actually got free used from somebody, but you can buy rolls of it, and a bunch of iron T-posts that I used post pounder and hammered in around the clearing. So this does surround the entire perimeter of my clearing because it's this black mesh. It blends into the trees pretty well, and so you don't really notice it. But it generally stops all the big critters from getting in my garden. But over time, because it's just attached with these zip ties, plastic cable ties to the fence posts, you know, just in the sun and the cold and the heat, those cable ties break or something bigger does try to jump it or breaks down part of the fence. So it does require a little bit of maintenance. As I said, this is a non-permanent situation. So this setup is working pretty well for me, and generally if you're just trying to fence a garden, probably would be cheaper than some of your other fencing options if you're willing to maintain it. So this is just what I'm going to do to fix it here. You can see, again, part of this is because I got used fencing material. And no, it's not wet or muddy back here. I just put my muck boots on because it keeps all the little brush from scratching at my legs. You can see there's some holes that I've patched up before. Got a new one here. Sometimes this bottom end gets kind of grown into the grass, which is partially fine because it seals up things from crawling under it too much. But I'm just going to close this up. And that's generally good enough. Those are little holes, but nothing big that this fence is stopping is going to come through that. You can see it's zip tied to this post, which is pretty solid. I'm going to say that looks good. I doubt anything came through there, but I just wanted to fix that while I was doing this before the rip got deeper. So I'm going to go over here back toward the compost pile. I see a spot that looks pretty saggy, so we're going to take a look at fixing that. Bring the camera over here through the woods edge. My compost bin I made out of some free pallets. It's pretty full at this time of year. So this is the spot where you can kind of see the sun hitting the fence there that I am suspecting might have lent itself to something getting into my garden. Let's put the camera there, see what I can do to hang this back up. Okay, again, that's not by any means snug, but it's back up and high, no big holes, so I think that's going to be good. Let's see if there's any other leaky critter looking spots in my fence. I'm going to keep walking my fence line here and checking for any other holes that have developed. Got a wild clematis that used it as a trellis to climb all up there. Some stretches don't seem to fall down for me hardly ever. Like in the trees here, they're kind of more self-supporting. So the camera and the light makes it kind of hard to see the fence even, which is nice. This spot looks a little saggy. And snug that up just a bit. This kind of sagginess where it's still up pretty high, I'm not even going to worry about, because as I said, you do not want it super snug or you'll be more prone to having critters jump it. But that fold, if you can see here, where it's hanging way down, I'm going to tighten that up a little bit. I'm going to have to set the camera down here. Okay, so tighten that up. Now on this slope, it's back to being above where I can reach. Again, you don't want it super tight, or stuff's going to come through it. And this is fairly temporary. This end gives you an idea of what my whole clearing looked like as far as the brush before cleaning it up, and what it would go back to looking like if I pull my house out right there again and just quit mowing it, because my quote yard is mostly brush more than grass. You just can't tell because keep it mowed. But this fence has been working for me for the last 3 years of gardening. The only time I've had a problem with it is when I've had like a big tree blow down across it, and then the deer all came in overnight and ate off all my strawberries before daylight. That was kind of a pain. But anyway, this stretch of fence, for whatever reason, the trees, you can see my solar panels up there, always seems to stay pretty snug. That all looks good. I don't think anything's coming through there. That part I can see even if the camera can't. I'm just going to check the entire perimeter here. Beautiful sunny day here. There's the cable coming in from the solar panels to the house. I can see the fence all along there, all along here. That one spot's a little saggy. Even right here in front of my van you can see it. When it's just me here and I'm in a hurry, I do often park outside the fence and simply duck under it myself, so I don't have to open and close my gate. But I can open that gate to drive in and out if I want. But I think that'll be easier to reach from the other side. Duck under here, snug this up just a little. See how that is kind of drooping way down. I'm gonna pull that tight. Okay, that looks a little more upright. Still soft, flexible, but not hanging quite so low. Go back here, duck back underneath in front of my van. And check this side again. This is a strip where it's kind of in the brush, and the brush seems to kind of hold it up so it doesn't really ever fall down along the back here behind all my flowers and stuff. Seems to be good. Behind the raspberry patch, that whole strip, the camera might not even show the fence, looks pretty good. Something you might want to be aware of if you're going to use this kind of fencing is that, coming along behind the house here now, you can hear the creek over there as well, so it's not raging like it was this spring by any means. This whole stretch looks good, so I might have got my loose spots. But anyway, something to be aware of is that this will actually stop big critters most of the time. And part of the reason I was able to get all this for free is because the last person who had used it And here's another one of the things that made me realize something bigger got in. Deer seem to love elderberries, and they munched off all the tops of my elderberry. Here's one of my gates. This is a heavier gauge, just a bigger, probably not gauge, but a bigger hole, but that still works. My gates I've done just so I can pull it back like that and duck under, then squish it back tight. And I've never seen anything push through there, though something could. That goes to my little path down to the creek. Get distracted here from my storytelling. All the rest of this looks good. So to finish my story, the thing to be aware of with this is it does keep big critters from going through it. Even though they could bust through it. It wouldn't be that hard. They just seem scared of it and they don't. Part of the reason I was able to get this fencing for free to reuse was because the last people who had used this had put it around their yard area to keep moose from eating off their new landscaping planting during the winter. Then they went away for a while, and a moose got in through a little spot they had not fenced, and then very sadly could not find its way back out the same hole, stayed trapped in there, and actually died up against their house because it couldn't get back to water and it couldn't eat that much snow. So if you're going to put it up, make sure it's in an area where, because it is kind of a temporary thing, and something could get in, make sure you're in a spot where you're going to be regularly so that you don't end up with some large animal trapped in there who then starves to death or dies of dehydration because they can't get out anywhere, because that's fairly sad. I'm in and out of my house here all the time, so if something got in, they would not be trapped here nearly long enough to die before I would realize it and open my big gate or, you know, do something to get them out. That hasn't happened to me, but that is something to be aware of if you're going to use that kind of fencing. But otherwise, that's how I keep all the big things out of my garden. And over the winter, the snows kind of, in some of the more open spots, tend to break the fence down, and that's why I get the moose walking through here. And when the snow melts in the spring, I go back out with more zip ties like you just saw me do and hang the fence back up, and it works again for the summer. So that's my fencing system. Hope that's helpful and maybe gives you some ideas if you've got a garden area that you need to keep things out of. Have a great day, guys. Thanks for watching.